This officer was on patrol when he spotted something unusual. In one of the stores, he observed someone pilfering 2 shoes. Upon approaching the individual, he discovered she was merely a young girl. Intent on aiding her, he escorted her home, only for her to reveal something that left him ashen-faced. It was a cold and windy day, and Officer David Murphy was nearing the end of his daily rounds. The last stretch he needed to cover was a shopping area, so it had to be done on foot. Reluctantly, David parked his car, not knowing his day was about to take an unexpected turn. David walked along the different shops and put his collar up as the weather seemed to worsen with every step he took. Huddled in his coat, he looked around for signs of criminal activity or a person in need. Satisfied, David turned his gaze toward the shops, and then he saw it. Did he see that right? David frowned as he entered the second-hand store. When David walked past, he thought he had seen a girl put something in her bag. Was she trying to steal them? "Hello, young lady," David said softly. He was surprised to see how young she still was. The girl was startled by him, but David kneeled down and tried to comfort her by saying she didn't have to worry. "What are you doing here?" he asked. The girl shrugged and looked at the floor, but when David asked about her parents, her eyes shot up at him, and she kept staring. David smiled. David repeated his question, but the girl stared at him without responding. So he got up and looked around for the girl's parents, to his surprise. The only other person in the store was the owner. Was the girl here alone? David sighed, as he realized there was just one thing for him to do. David grabbed the girl's bag and returned the shoes to the owner. "Let's get you home," he told the girl. When he pushed the door open, the wind almost blew it off its hinges, so he was happy to return to the car, unaware his day was about to take a drastic turn. During the car ride, David noticed that the little girl felt more at ease. She began to look out of the window and moved around instead of staring at him. This compelled David to try and get her to talk again, but he had to be careful because her behavior had been very unpredictable up until this point. He turned the music a little lower and gently asked her name. The girl looked at him momentarily as if weighing her options. "Scarlett Baker," she eventually said. David was taken aback for a moment as the girl immediately gave her full name, but it was a welcome surprise, or so he thought. Shortly after Scarlett shared her name, David called the station and asked for information about her. The station would get back to him with the information, so during that time, David tried to find out more about her by continuing their conversation, not knowing what shocking truth would eventually be revealed. David was primarily interested in why Scarlett was trying to steal the shoes, but was surprised by her answer. "It was a present," Scarlett said with a small voice. Confused, David asked what she meant by that, and she responded she was trying to get a present for her sister. Sounds believable, David thought. He quickly shook his head and got back to the conversation. Scarlett was finally talking, so maybe he didn't have to wait for the station to share her information. But when David asked the girl where she lived, he immediately regretted it, because before he even finished the question, it happened again. In the corner of his eyes, David noticed how she stiffened up. She didn't respond anymore, and when he looked over, Scarlett was gazing at him again. David sighed. Why did she behave like this? Everything seemed to go well as she was answering questions moments ago. Then it struck him. At first, David thought her behavior was random, that the little girl was anxious and didn't know what to do. But he noticed a pattern. It happened in the store and now again. Both times, he asked about her parents and where she lived. But why does it cause her to react like this? For Officer Murphy, the portable radio called, shaking David out of his thoughts, eager to know what they found. He quickly grabbed the walkie-talkie and asked if they found the girl's address. David was happy to hear that they did, and when the station shared it, something peculiar happened. When the station started to communicate, Scarlett was startled. Still, David noticed she was listening eagerly to every word that was said. When the station mentioned her address, David observed the girl carefully looking for a reaction, and he was right to do so because she quivered slightly when she heard her address. A feeling of concern overcame him, and David started to worry seriously for Scarlett. Why was she behaving like this? Why did she shut down at the mention of her parents and home? He started to doubt his decision to bring Scarlett to her house seriously. What was going on there for a moment? David hesitated, wondering what the wise course of action would be. Then he shook his head. He would bring Scarlett home and talk to the parents, determined to get answers. He entered the address into the navigation system and drove off, unaware he would come to a shocking realization. The navigation sent him in a whole different direction than he had expected, because up until this moment, David thought the girl and her family would be poor. So when they entered a wealthy-looking neighborhood, he was confused. This situation was becoming weirder and weirder, and it raised many questions. "Almost there," he said to Scarlett. He was driving on autopilot as the questions flooded his brain. What was going on exactly? Why would Scarlett feel the need to steal 2 shoes when they could clearly afford them? David was happy he decided to bring Scarlett home because he hoped to get answers. He looked at the girl again, who was now staring at the road in front of her. Was she anxious to get back home? David's hands clenched the steering wheel. He was going to clear this whole situation up when he talked to the parents, not knowing the surprise he would get. "Here we are," David said softly when he stopped the car in front of Scarlett's house. She still did not talk to him and looked at her house. David followed her gaze inside, determined to get answers. He opened the car door, but before he could step out, Scarlett said something unexpected. "How can I go back without the shoes?" he said in a small voice, leaving David taken aback by this comment. He thought for a moment before answering, assuring her she could get her sister another present with the help of her parents. But then Scarlett revealed something incredible. "I don't have a sister," Scarlett suddenly said. David closed the car door immediately, looked at her seriously, and asked what she meant, but nothing could have prepared him for her response. "That's what I'm supposed to say when I get caught," Scarlett said. David's mind raced. She was instructed to lie. From the first moment he met the girl, her behavior seemed off, but now the day had taken a very strange turn as he realized she was instructed to steal. David asked Scarlett, who put her up to this, even though he felt he already knew the answer. "My parents," she said. David's face went pale when he heard it. It was what he thought beforehand, but hearing it come out of her mouth still surprised him. Her parents told her to steal and lie. What could possibly justify that? He felt anger come up in his body as he left the car and slammed the door. He tried calming himself down as he noticed Scarlett becoming increasingly uncomfortable. "Everything will be okay," he said to her with a smile. David grabbed her hand, and they walked toward the front door together. With a determined look on his face, David knocked on the door, not ready for the surprise he would get. A woman opened the door and wanted to say something to David, but then she noticed Scarlett. "Richard, come here," she called back into the house, after which she jumped forward to embrace Scarlett. Not much later, a man emerged from the house and reacted the exact same way. David was perplexed. David wanted to ask what was happening, but the woman interrupted him. She apologized for their manners and invited David in, confused by the whole situation. David decided to enter the house, realizing this was his opportunity to talk to the parents and get answers, but then they said something curious. "Thank you for bringing Scarlett home," the mother said as she continued to explain. They were looking for her everywhere. David couldn't stand it anymore and interrupted her story. He needed answers, and he wanted them now. "Why was she stealing shoes? And why was she doing it for you?" he demanded. David watched the couple closely, who stared at each other, but it wasn't surprise he saw on their faces. It was frustration and despondency. "So that's what she was doing," the father suddenly said, causing David's mind to work overtime. He didn't understand what was happening at all, but then the couple started to explain. They explained that they weren't Scarlett's biological parents, and that ever since they adopted her, she randomly stole things. Whenever they would find out, Scarlett would say her parents told her to do it. This confused the couple deeply, as they never told her to do anything like it. They were at a loss. They tried everything to make her stop, explaining she didn't have to steal anything for them or punish her when they found out she did anyway, but nothing seemed to work. Their last hope was to try and contact the biological parent, but they couldn't find anything about until now. David listened to the story with increasingly more interest. What an unexpected turn of events this was. He looked at Scarlett, who clearly was a damaged girl. "Maybe I can be of assistance," David suggested. hoping he could help and prevent Scarlett from getting in trouble, not knowing where it would lead him. The couple looked at each other and then responded eagerly to his suggestion. It seemed like they were waiting for something like this to happen, as they burst out an explanation of what they had done until now. "We couldn't find any details because all files were classified," the father said. David was surprised to hear this, but it immediately gave him a solid first lead. They shared contact details, and he promised to stay in touch before returning to the station. Once there, David dove into the files and started to dig into Scarlett's background, wondering what he would find. His search led him towards some classified files, which David could only access after filling in special forms. "Let's see what we got here," he said, while opening the documents. David was surprised and happy when he discovered the information led to a nearby town. So he immediately got in his car. Once David arrived there, he saw no police station or hospital. So the next logical step for him was to visit the town hall. He asked the employee for the birth files for the last 10 years, but instead of handing David files, the employee gave him a note with an address on it. Before David could ask what this meant, the employee moved on to the next person in line, confused. David left the town hall. He looked at the note and decided to visit the address, as it was his only lead now. After he knocked on the door, he was surprised to see who opened it. "Can I help you?" the old woman asked him when she opened the door. David was stunned. He was sent to an old woman's house. What was going on? But with no other option left, David explained what he was looking for, after which the woman revealed that she was a nurse. A nurse? David repeated with a surprised tone. This revelation gave him some new hope. Did she have birth files and adoption information? The nurse simply nodded and asked what he wanted to know. When David asked her about Scarlett, he was amazed by how fast she found information about her and what it was. The nurse searched through some files, but she already started talking before she even showed him one. "An unfortunate case," she said, after which she explained that Scarlett's biological parents were both criminals, due to which they eventually lost custody of the child. David shot up after hearing this. He knew exactly where to go. With all this information, David returned to his car. After getting in his vehicle, his hands fumbled over the dashboard. "Where are you?" he mumbled while looking for a colleague's contact info. When he found it, David immediately called and tried to get updated information on the biological parent. But when the colleague picked up after David quickly explained what he needed, the colleague told him he couldn't just share new information. As it turned out, both biological parents turned their lives around, but for their own safety, they had been given new identities. The colleague explained he couldn't share these identities without a good reason. Without a good reason, David growled, thinking he had an excellent reason to ask for this information. So he explained the whole story again and insisted to his colleague that he needed this new information. Eventually, after hearing David out, the colleague gave in and shared the details with him. David entered the address he just received into the navigation system as fast as possible. It was still possible to speak to the biological parents today, if he was quick. On the way over, dust started falling, and he pushed the pedal a little deeper. Moments later, David knocked on the door. It was now evening, and David's heart jumped a little when the front door opened. They were home. The couple was surprised to see an officer at their doorstep so late in the day. But that surprise would soon turn into happiness as David started to explain what he was doing there. The mouths of the biological parents slowly fell open while they listened. "Of course, we want to help," they yelled at him. After he finished his story, they had given up on seeing their little girl ever again, as it was part of their new identity. But they wouldn't let this go. The following day, David contacted the adoptive parents and told them he found the biological parents. They were over the moon and couldn't wait to meet each other. After David shared all the contact information, the two couples agreed to meet. Scarlett would see her biological parents for the first time in 5 years. The meetup was more than they hoped for, and the couples agreed to stay in touch. Scarlett could visit her biological parents frequently, and it immediately showed a positive effect on her behavior. Both parents didn't know how to thank David, but he was just happy to be of service. I'm really keen to know your thoughts on this story, so please don't hesitate to share your insights in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video and found it engaging, I invite you to subscribe to our channel for more similar content. Feel free to share this video with your friends and family to spread the enjoyment. Take good care of yourselves, and I'm excited to connect with you in our future videos.